seems to be fair to say that many, if not most, classicists, meaning academic classicists today, don't read Latin fluently, at least not the sort of the most difficult classical authors. So Mary Beard, who's sort of a celebrity classicist, I guess you could say. I don't know much about her work, but she admitted a while back that she doesn't read Latin fluently. And what that means is to be able to read it without constantly stopping, consulting, a dictionary or whatever, translating mentally, to be able to read it as though it were, as though you had learned French or German as a second language and were simply reading and able to think to some extent, at least, in that language. The fact that many people who are professional classicists can't do this in Latin and Greek is kind of startling. Maybe they have this sort of preconceived notion that, well, it's sort of pointless or frivolous or just for some obscure reason impossible to do this with a dead language. But then the other big thing is just the currently predominant methodology for teaching and learning Latin in schools.
Yeah, I think that, your essay does a good job of laying it out. It gives a good overview of there's more or less two basic camps. And so you can call one the grammar translation camp, and that's probably what most people are familiar with. And when people think about studying a language, they will just automatically picture this. And then there's the kind of natural method, direct method, communicative. It has lots of terms people use. Yeah. And so the grammar translation, the name's right. The name gives it to you. It's a focus on explicit instruction in grammatical forms, and then doing translation exercises to master those forms. So here's a lecture on the perfect and the imperfect tenses. And now here's a line from Ovid that includes perfect and imperfect. Find them and render the sentence into English, and use the dictionary to look up as many words as you need to, because there's a whole bunch of vocabulary packed into this one sentence that you've never seen before, because you've never read Ovid before, because you hardly read. You just get tiny little snippets of Latin in your whole education. You're not sitting down and cracking it open like you would Lord of the Rings and being like, oh, this is fun. And so if people kind of think of that and imagine it being hard and tedious, they are right. It's not how you successfully learned your mother tongue. And if you've learned a second language in the meantime, you probably didn't learn your second language that way either. You probably learned it with a more communicative method. And so these communicative methods, however you want to talk about them, can really range from immersion, which is probably going to give you the most kind of closest to learning your mother tongue, drop you into Spain. And if you want to survive, you got to speak Spanish. So nobody there speaks English. No offense to the Spaniards. So immersion is that's not the only communicative method, but that's what a lot of people in the communicative world want to do, is have fully immersive Latin classrooms where you walk in and nobody's speaking English and the teacher's just speaking Latin at you, and you're reading some Latin stories. The teacher's acting stuff out. So TPRS and acting, all this stuff is kind of in that domain. Not everyone's into full immersion. I'm not into full immersion. I think it actually can be less efficient to never use English to explain something hard.
Right.
But what all of these methods have in common is this idea that you need to be taking in a lot of input So you'll hear the phrase comprehensible input. Take in a lot of input because your mind is a language learning machine. Everyone does it. Everyone learns a language. If you speak your mother tongue, you learned a language. Your mind is built for this.
Yeah.
So you need to give it lots of input, just like when you were a kid, and your mom pointed to a tree and said tree, and you're like, oh, that's a tree. And then you need to be practicing and doing the output too. Speaking, writing. Yeah, and so one thing I should make clear is there are some people who see Latin speech as a goal. They want to be able to speak well in Latin. And I think all the people in this community generally, we'd like to be able to speak well. But that's really an end in and of itself, the speaking is. But you don't have to have the goal of, I want to just be able to discourse at will in Latin.
Right.
To do this communicative method. Because I think that speaking in Latin, and then I'll just say writing, because I really see these as the same thing, just in different genres, is composing in Latin, writing things in Latin, are really incredibly helpful tools for learning the language so that you can read it well.
Yeah.
And it will just slow down your acquisition of the language and thus your reading ability to never produce, whether it's writing or speaking. You're just hurting yourself. And so it's really good to do, even if your goal isn't to give a speech in Latin.
Right.
What the effect that has is teaching you to appreciate Latin as its own language rather than as a code for English. And this is one of the big problems with the grammar translation method, is because you memorize a vocab list, or don't even do that, you just look up words in a dictionary for their translation, and you learn a grammar rule, and then you translate a Latin text into English, you're training your mind to see Latin as a code.
Yes.
Oh, this thing has meaning that will be revealed to me once it's in English. And then you're always at a remove. Whereas if you're learning a Latin word with more Latin words, or learning a Latin word with pictures, so this is the first illustrated textbook, I believe, in history, was a Latin textbook that did this. It's John Amos Comenius, who was a Czech, Bohemian, I think, educator. And he's like, if we want to teach a language, we need to teach it the same way we learn our native language, which is associate a word with an image. And so he has these old woodcuts, very homey. Orbis Pictus is the book. But that's what Forcalini does. That's what speaking it does. That's what associating with images does.
Yeah. And let me read this C.S. Lewis quote, which I used in my article. I just borrowed it from a piece on the ALI website. So this is from his autobiography, Surprised by Joy, and it just is a great way of expressing what you're talking about. So he says, those in whom the Greek word lives only while they are hunting for it in the lexicon, and who then substitute the English word for it, are not reading the Greek at all. They are only solving a puzzle. The very formula nous means a ship is wrong. Nous and ship both mean a thing. They do not mean one another. Behind nous, as behind navis or naka, we want to have a picture of a dark, slender mass with sail or oars climbing the ridges with no officious English word intruding.
Oh, so good. So good. You can always count on Lewis for a good illustration of a concept.
Yeah. Maybe we should talk a little bit about Orberg, because that's the focus of my article. And so Orberg has this great reputation as among the proponents of the natural method as kind of the master craftsman of the natural method language textbook. So he wrote this Lingua Latina per se illustrata, Latin language illustrated through itself. And there's 2 books, Familia Romana and Roma Eterna. But I went through, over the past couple of years, I went through Familia Romana. And so just to give people a gauge, like I said, once you're most of the way through that, you'll be ready to start reading like scripture in Latin. You'll be, you probably can start praying the divine office in Latin. You might not understand every single thing, but you're kind of ready to start going into those texts. It is a truly amazing work. So I guess the first edition was published in the 1950s. This Danish linguist, and like I said, it's illustrated through itself. So the entire book's in Latin, and the grammar explanations are in Latin, and there's pictures and there's marginal notes, which kind of help you to understand the context. So I think the first sentence in the book is Roma in Italia est. Anybody can understand what that means, right? And then you go from there, and it's, there's various books that use a similar method, but this one is so beautifully constructed and so entertaining to read through. And the way that he repeats concepts is not tedious. It's like you almost don't notice it sometimes, how he is varying a concept and repeating it and sort of drilling it in the course of a story or a description of, the culture of whatever century, first century Rome. And so it's beautifully done. And, I would just encourage anybody who wants to learn Latin, just grab that book. There's supplemental books, that exercise books and things that I talk about in my article that I used as well. But if you just get that book, it will change your experience of Latin learning. Yeah.
Undoubtedly. Yeah. For people, you hear language textbook and you're like, okay, I imagine I'll get like some explanations of things and then lists of words and then, like activities I have to do, applying all that in this kind of grammar translation fashion. And you pick up the book and you're very surprised to find that it's a story. The overwhelming bulk of the book is just talking about this family, this Roman family, and their like misadventures over the course. I think it all happens over like 48 hours.
Oh, really?
It's long, yeah.
Wow.
But it's a long book. Like, I've got it right
It's
here.
35 chapters.
Yeah, 300 pages.
Yeah.
And then, at the end of chapters, it has these very short, simple explanations of the grammar that pops up in each chapter. But the bulk of it is just, improbus Marcus, who hits his sister and laughs and is pushed into the pool, and, the loyal slave and the lazy bad slave who runs away. I won't spoil too much. And then it ends with, this scene of a Roman dinner party where they're reciting Latin poetry, and you're reading Ovid out of the mouths of various characters.
Right.
And so it's a very surprising way to teach a language. But as the experience of countless people, us two right here included, attests, it works really, 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 really well. It's perhaps the best language textbook ever made for any language. And it came out of this strange ephemeral organization, the Nature Method Institute, that nobody really knows exactly the history of it. People have done all these investigations to try and find it. They produced a bunch of these books. You can go find the French one. You can go find the Italian one.
Right.
I think there's a Russian one that nobody's been able to find. So I've heard rumors it's like hidden in the Michigan State University Library. I don't know that that's true.
Amazing.
But Orberg, one way or another, got the copyright back from the Nature Method Institute, I imagine, after it folded, and then kept improving the book based on his experience in the classroom.
Right.
And so it's become a great book for autodidacts like yourself. All these people have taught themselves Latin using it. However, I don't think it was really meant for that. And so a lot of people will start with it and then realize like, okay, this isn't quite enough to teach me Latin. I'm going to need some help. But it was an incredible springboard to get them started. And with some outside input, whether from a live teacher or a grammar translation textbook to kind of explain things more, or some other method. I mean, you yourself used a bunch of supplementary materials from the Orberg verse and elsewhere. Right. They find it's an incredibly useful tool.